The raven brought more than just words. It carried the weight of choice. Lord Eddard Stark stood in the Tower of the Hand, the parchment from Lord Renly Baratheon crushed in his hand, its offer still fresh in his mind. Take the throne, seize the boy king, and end the Lannisters now. Outside, the city sweltered under the summer sun, unaware of the storm about to break. Ned had always chosen honor over cunning. It was what made him who he was, and what, perhaps, would destroy him. But this time, felt different. Too many lies, too much blood. Jon Arryn dead, Robert gone. And now Joffrey, a child born of incest, seated on the Iron Throne under Queen Cersei's wicked gaze. He had given her the chance to flee. She stayed. There would be no second warning. He turned to Ser Barristan Selmy, still loyal and still blind. Summon the men of the City Watch. Tell Janos Slynt I have the king's command. We move at dawn. Ser Barristan frowned. You intend to arrest the queen? No, Ned said, steely. I intend to remove her. Dawn broke over King's Landing as golden banners flapped lazily in the wind. The Red Keep glistened like a serpent basking in the sun, but beneath its towers chaos stirred. Ned Stark rode at the front of a small but lethal host, his household guards, trusted northern men, and 50 gold cloaks now paid, not in Lannister gold, but from the royal coffers at Littlefinger's behest. Petyr Baelish smiled slyly beside him, still thinking he was pulling the strings. But Ned had learned. He was done playing games with snakes. He had Winterfell blood in his veins. They entered the throne room with steel drawn and faces grim. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne like a boy playing war. Cersei stood beside him, cloaked in regal red and false calm. The Kingsguard moved to bar Ned's path. I come in the name of King Robert, Ned called, and with his final will. Joffrey Baratheon is not his true-born son. He is not the heir. Gasps rippled through the hall. Cersei's mask cracked for a second. Jaime wasn't here. He was still with the armies in the Riverlands. Her safety net had frayed. You dare speak treason? She spat. I speak the truth, Ned said. He raised the parchment bearing Robert's seal and held it high. The realm will decide. And then came the clash. The gold cloaks turned on each other. Slynt's loyalty was fleeting, but today it was bought. Ser Barristan raised his blade, not against Ned, but against Ser Meryn Trant, whose honor had long since rotted. Swords clanged, blood spilled on the marble floors, and the throne room screamed with the sound of steel. Ned Stark did not falter. He moved with the fury of a man who had buried too many good men. With ice drawn, he carved a path through the chaos, straight toward the queen and her boy. Cersei tried to flee. Petyr reached for his dagger. Sansa shrieked. Arya was gone. Thank the gods she had already slipped away with Syrio Forel. In the end, it was not a Lannister blade that brought Ned to his knees. It was a northern one. One of his own, bribed or blackmailed, cut him across the back, just as he reached the throne. Petyr Baelish knelt beside him, whispering like a lover. I told you not to trust me. But Ned did not die. He awoke days later in the dungeons, broken but alive, and the war had begun. Chains dug into Ned Stark's wrists as he sat slumped in the damp cell beneath the Red Keep. Torchlight flickered on stone walls, casting long shadows across the floor where his blood had dried. His breath was ragged, not from pain, he could bear pain, but from the bitter taste of betrayal, not from an enemy, from someone who had worn his colors, sworn his name. A northern man. Outside his cell, footsteps echoed. Lannister boots, heavy, confident. They stopped before his door, and it creaked open to reveal Varys, cloaked in silk and silence. You're lucky to be alive, the spider whispered, eyes glittering. Cersei wanted your head on a spike before nightfall. It was your daughter, Sansa, who begged the boy king to show mercy. Ned grimaced. Mercy from a bastard prince. Varys gave a small smile. Mercy from a mother using her child's crown like a dagger. Ned leaned forward as far as the chains would let him. Is the city at war? No, not yet. But it teeters. The gold cloaks are split. The streets whisper rebellion. House Stark's name burns on every tongue. Varys stepped closer. You drew blood in the throne room, Lord Stark. Not even Aerys saw that kind of defiance within his own walls. That moment cannot be undone. Ned looked down. Then let the moment become truth. Let the lies die with me if they must. But Varys only sighed. The lies will not die, Lord Stark. They are too useful. Elsewhere, chaos brewed. In the Tower of the Hand, Sansa Stark was being kept in gilded captivity. She wore silk and jewels, but her eyes were red from crying. Her letters to her mother had been burned. Her pleas to the Queen ignored. Her dreams of marriage to Joffrey now felt like ash. He's not the boy I thought he was, she whispered to Scepter Mordain. No, the Scepter answered grimly. He's a boy with a crown, and that's the most dangerous kind. At the same time, Arya Stark was no longer a lady. She was dirt-covered, sword-handed, and silent. She had fled the Red Keep the night of the battle, slipping through the shadows with needle clenched tight. Now she lived in the alleyways of Flea Bottom, a ghost among the rats, watching and listening, burning with fury. Her father's face haunted her dreams. She wanted to go back and fight, stab someone, anyone, for what they'd done, but she didn't know who. Not yet. In the north, the Raven arrived just as Robb Stark sat at council. His hand shook as he read the news. His father imprisoned, the Queen's treason exposed, then buried, King's Landing in chaos, Sansa hostage, Arya missing. He looked up, his boyhood gone. "Call the banners," he said. His voice carried through the hall like a sword through flesh. "If the Lannisters want blood, they'll drown in it." Lady Catelyn stood beside him, grief swallowed by resolve. "We ride at dawn," and so it began. Not the War of the Five Kings, but something darker, something bloodier. Because this time Ned Stark had not bent the knee. This time he had drawn his sword in the lion's den, and survived. In the red, Keep Cersei paced like a caged beast. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from rage. Jaime was still days away. The lords of the realm were murmuring too loud, their loyalty unsure. And Tywin Lannister had written just one line back. "You let him live. Now you will bleed." Joffrey, ever the boy king, had grown bolder. "We should just kill him. Put his head on the wall like a wolf. That'll teach the North." Cersei slapped him so hard the crown nearly flew off his head. She wasn't afraid of Ned Stark, but she was afraid of what he symbolized: rebellion, truth, fire beneath the ice. If he lived, her house would bleed, but if he died, too soon, too openly, the North would burn the South in vengeance. So she played a dangerous game, one where poison was on every goblet and every whisper might be a sword. And deep beneath the Red Keep, Ned Stark waited. Not for mercy, not for release. He waited for word from the North, for the howl of wolves rising beyond the wall of men, for winter to answer. The raven came at dusk, its wings black against the bleeding sky. Ned heard the flutter before he saw the jailer. A scroll was passed through the bars of his cell, sealed with wax, and a direwolf pressed deep into it. The moment he saw it, something inside him stirred, something colder than the stone beneath his feet, but stronger than any chain around his wrists. The North had answered. The message was brief, written in Robb's hand. "We march. Hold fast. Winter is coming. No pleasantries, no tears, no regrets. Just resolve. Just Stark." For the first time in days, Ned allowed himself a thin, tired smile. His son was no longer a boy. He was a Stark in full. But the Lannisters wouldn't sit idle. That very night, Cersei summoned the small council. Varys and Pycelle came hesitantly. Pater Baelish, as always, wore a smile no one trusted. Janos Slint lingered like a dog, hoping for scraps. Joffrey had not been invited. Cersei could no longer afford his impulsive madness. "They ride for King's Landing," she announced without ceremony. 20,000 swords, maybe more, led by the boy Robb. "The North rises." Littlefinger's smirk didn't falter. "Then we should send them a welcome party, one with wildfire and Lannister steel." Pycelle shook his head, wheezing. "The boy is dangerous, yes, but only because he fights for a symbol. His father. Remove the symbol, and the army may scatter." "No," Cersei snapped. "If we kill Ned Stark now, we lose all control. The realm bleeds either way. But if we use him—" Varys's voice was a whisper. "You mean a puppet?" Cersei turned to the eunuch. "I mean a weapon. If we cannot kill the wolf, we leash him and use him to tear his own pack apart." Ned was pulled from his cell the next morning and taken, not to an executioner, but to the Queen's solar. The sunlight cut through coloured glass as if mocking the darkness in the room. Cersei stood alone by a table, hands resting on a map. Of the realm. She didn't look up when he entered. "You've made a mess of things," she said coolly. "You and your northern pride." Ned didn't reply. His wrists bled from the chains, but his back was straight. She walked toward him slowly. "Your son marches south. Your banners rise. You'll plunge this kingdom into civil war, all for the sake of truth." "You murdered the king," he said, voice flat. "You put a bastard on the throne. The war was coming whether I fought or not." Cersei paused. "And yet, you are still alive. Why do you think that is?" He met her eyes. "Because you're afraid of me?" "No," she smiled bitterly. "Because I can still use you." Later, back in his cell, Ned pondered her words. The offer she had made was foul. She would release him, publicly pardon him, even reunite him with Sansa. If he would bend the knee, swear loyalty to Joffrey, and denounce Robb's rebellion as treason. He had refused, but then Sansa had come. Not the sobbing girl who had once dreamed of becoming queen, but a quiet, broken shell of her former self. Her hands trembled, her eyes begged. "Father, please," she whispered. "Just say the words. Say you were wrong. They'll let you go. We can go home." Home. The word stabbed deeper than any blade. There was no home left for her, for him. Not in Winterfell, not in the south. Only war now. Only vengeance and snow and blood. But she was still a Stark, still his daughter. He couldn't let her suffer in silence. Meanwhile, Arya Stark moved like a shadow through the black cells. She had made a friend, a rat-faced boy named Tum, small and slippery, who claimed to know every tunnel and crack beneath the Red Keep. He said he'd seen the Wolf Lord being taken down that hall. Arya clenched her teeth. "He's not a Wolf Lord," she said. "He's my father." Tum scratched his greasy hair. "Even better. What you want with him?" Arya looked down at Needle. "I'm going to get him out." She wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She was a Stark, and she was ready to kill. Beyond the walls, war moved closer. Robb had crossed the neck. The River Lords rallied. Walder Frey sniffed opportunity. The Lannister army, led by Sir Jaime, had begun to burn villages along the Trident, hoping to bait the young wolf into rashness. But Robb was not his father. He did not trust easily, nor forgive quickly. And when he looked at the banner of the direwolf flying over his camp, he thought not of glory. He thought of vengeance. Back in the Red Keep, Cersei received another raven. This one bore a different seal, the lion. Her father had crossed the Blackwater, and he was bringing fire. The wind over King's Landing carried the scent of war. Inside the Red Keep, tension spread like wildfire. Cersei paced her solar in silence, eyes locked on the map of Westeros spread before her. Robb Stark's host had pushed farther south than anyone expected. Riverlords defected by the day. Even the Freys, those miserly cowards, had opened their gates to the boy. Worse still, whispers spread that men in the Reach, once loyal to Renly, were watching the north with new eyes. Wolves were gathering, and in the dungeons below, the man who started it all refused to bend. She had offered Ned Stark his life, his freedom, even his daughter. Still, he refused. She thought she knew honor, but she didn't understand this kind of fury. His silence was louder than rebellion. Then came the second raven from Tywin. Delay no longer. Execute Stark. Rally the realm with blood. But even Cersei knew, if she killed Ned now, the war would become something unstoppable. She needed another way. Down in the darkness of the black cells, Ned's body ached, but his mind remained sharp. His time with Robert had taught him politics. His time in the north had taught him patience. But now, it was his children that haunted him. Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon, Robb. He replayed their faces every night like prayers. Robb was fighting. Arya was loose in the city, if the gods were kind. Sansa, she was trapped in the Queen's web. He wanted to fight, to rise, to kill. But all he had were chains, until one night the shadows moved differently. He stirred as the cell door creaked. Not the usual guard, not a Lannister. A smaller shape slipped inside. "Arya," he rasped. "No," came a whisper. But she sent me. It was the boy. Tum, a rat of Flea Bottom. In his grubby hand he held a loop of keys stolen from a passed-out gold cloak. "I know the tunnels," he grinned. "Want out, Lord Stark?" Ned's heart raced. "Where is my daughter?" "She's got Needle, and she's waiting." An hour later, they slipped into the belly of the Red Keep. The tunnels were tight, rank with mold and silence. Tum scurried. Ahead, a torch in one hand, pride in his steps. Ned stumbled behind, bones aching but soul alight. His chains were gone. His will was back. But freedom was not easy. At the fifth turn, they hit steel. A squad of gold cloaks blocked their exit, alerted by some whisper, some traitor. Ned stepped in front of Tum, but before a sword was drawn, a blur burst from the shadows. Arya. She moved like death, needle flashing. One guard went down before he even saw her. The second turned, too slow. The third grabbed her arm, but she bit his hand until he screamed. Ned rushed in, grabbing a fallen sword. For the first time since the throne room, he fought, and it felt like coming home. When the blood settled, they stood amid silence. Arya was breathing hard. "Told you I could find you." Ned dropped the sword and pulled her into his arms. He hadn't cried in years, but now his tears came freely. They didn't go for the gate. Tum led them through the secret passageways only the rats knew. Out beneath the walls, through a tunnel where corpses were dumped into the Blackwater. The stench was unbearable. The water was black, but Ned Stark crawled through it with his daughter at his side. At the edge of the forest, outside the city, a rider waited. "Urine of the Night's Watch. The gods must want you alive," the old man muttered as Ned emerged. "You've no idea," Ned whispered back. Yoren handed Arya a cloak. "Get to the road. You've got half a day before they realize you're gone. After that, run like the bloody wind." Ned looked toward the capital one last time. He had entered that city with honor. He left with vengeance. Back inside the Red Keep, panic spread. Cersei threw a goblet across the room as the guards reported Ned's escape. The North would know. The people would talk. The boy king would scream. But worse than all of that, her father had arrived at the gates. Tywin Lannister stood beneath the lion's banner, his face stone, his army vast. He had come not just for battle, but for control. Robb Stark crossed the twins with fire in his eyes. He had no idea his father was free, but when he did find out, the war would not stop. It would only burn hotter, because the North no longer fought for justice. They fought for vengeance, and for the man who had defied death in the lion's den. The road from King's Landing to Riverrun was long, harsh and filled with danger. Ned Stark, gaunt and weathered from weeks in chains, rode cloaked and silent beside Arya, who had barely left his side since they fled. Behind them, Yoren and Tum followed on stolen horses, the boy chatty as ever, but Ned barely heard a word. He was free, but he was not safe. Each bend in the road could mean Lannister scouts. Each village they passed might hold loyalists. And every night, Ned dreamt of Catelyn's face, not as he remembered it, warm and strong, but pale with grief, whispering, "You should have come home sooner." Arya rode like she had been born in a saddle, her eyes sharper now, hardened by the things she'd done. She'd killed men, saved him. She wasn't a little girl anymore. And Ned didn't know whether to be proud or afraid. One night, by a cold stream under a half-moon, she asked him the question that had been rotting inside both of them. "Are we going to Robb?" Ned nodded. "Yes. If the gods are just, he's still at Riverrun. We'll make our stand there." She looked at the water, her voice low. "He'll want war. He already has it." She turned to him then. "And you? Will you fight?" Ned didn't answer right away. His hands clenched the hilt of the sword Yoren had given him, a plain thing, not worthy of a lord, but enough to kill with. He stared at the reflection of the moon in the stream and whispered, "I've bled for truth, now I'll bleed for my family, for my family." At Riverrun, the banners of the wolf and the trout flew high. Robb Stark stood on the battlements beside his uncle Edmure, watching the sunrise over the riverlands, now choked by war. He wore armor now, but it was his face that had changed the most, stern, cold, older than his years. When the riders were first spotted, Robb thought it was another raven, another scout. But then he saw the banner, the black direwolf on white, and his heart stuttered. When Ned dismounted in the courtyard, mud-splattered and weary, Robb stood frozen, as if his father were a ghost. Arya ran forward first. Robb followed, dropping his sword. The embrace was fierce and wordless, a son clinging to the man he thought he'd lost. Ned said nothing. He just held his boy and whispered, "You're leading them well." Tears welled in Robb's eyes. "I thought they'd killed you. I thought—" "They tried," Ned said, stepping back, "but the gods weren't finished with me." Catelyn came rushing from the great hall moments later, her cry piercing the air as she saw him. Their embrace was quieter, but the weight in it could have stopped armies. "I failed," he whispered. "You lived," she replied. "That's enough." In the war room that night, the mood was different. The lords of the north and the riverlands gathered around the table, eyes on Ned. They had followed Robb into war, but now the man they had long called Lord returned with fire behind his words. "The Lannisters poisoned the throne," Ned said. "They murdered the king, tried to kill my son, held my daughters hostage, and sought to end my house. I offered them peace once. They answered with blood. Now we answer." Back the lords shouted in approval. One of them, Galbart Glover, stood. "The boy king must fall." Ned's eyes were steel. "The boy king is a lie, and so is his claim." Another rose. "Then who do we name? Stannis? Renly?" Robb turned to Ned, waiting. Ned looked around the hall. "We name no one." A hush. "Ufel, the south is broken. Let them squabble over their iron throne. The north will not kneel again, not to dragons, not to lions." The old Greatjon roared. "Then who do we follow?" Ned didn't answer. Robb stepped forward. "Then let it be known. There sits a man who lived honorably, who bled for justice, who defied kings and queens and rose from chains to lead again. I will follow Lord Eddard Stark as king in the north." The hall exploded in cheers. Swords were drawn and pounded on shields. The Greatjon bellowed, "The king in the north!" Until the words echoed through stone. Ned held up a hand. "No," he said firmly. "The north needs youth, fire, resolve. I was made for peace, but peace is dead." He turned to Robb. "Bend no knee, Robb. Wear no crown of lies. If the north must rise, let it rise with a Stark who's ready for war." And so it was. In the great hall of Riverrun, Robb Stark was crowned king in the north. But this time, the old wolf stood beside him, not in chains, but as the sword in the dark. Back in King's Landing, Tywin Lannister crushed the Raven's letter in his fist. "Ned Stark lives," he snarled. Cersei paled. Joffrey screamed, "Then kill him!" But Tywin only said, "We had one chance to end the wolf line. Now the forest burns." He turned to Sir Gregor Clegane. "Gather the mountain. We ride." The war came faster than anyone expected. In the south, Tywin Lannister's forces swept through the Riverlands like fire across dry fields. Villages were torched, crops burned to ash, and corpses left as messages. The mountain led the vanguard, leaving behind blood instead of banners. There was no diplomacy, only slaughter, but the north had changed, with Robb crowned and Ned beside him. They no longer fought like rebels, they fought like rulers, commanders, wolves with purpose. The northern army, now hardened and furious, met the Lannisters not with hesitation, but hunger. At Oxcross they struck by night. Ned rode with the flank, cutting down men half his age. Robb led the centre, driving their enemies into chaos. Grey wind was a streak of death, tearing through men who had once laughed at northern savagery. By dawn, over 1,000 Lannister men were dead, but victory came with a cost. Maester Luwin delivered the news to Ned late the next evening beneath a tent. Glowing with torchlight, Lord Karstark's sons are dead. Taken by Sir Amory Lorch. Captured trying to slow the Lannister advance. Ned closed his eyes. The Lannisters want hostages. Leverage? They want vengeance, Maester Luwin corrected softly. As do we. Outside, the camp was quiet. Snow had begun to fall, not heavy yet, just enough to remind them that winter was coming. Ned stepped into the cold, breathing in the air. The same scent he remembered from Winterfell. Pine, steel, and the distant memory of peace. It felt like a lifetime ago. Catelyn joined him soon after, wrapping a cloak around his shoulders. "You shouldn't fight in the front," she whispered. "I shouldn't be here at all," he replied. "But I am, so I'll fight." She looked at him. "The others follow Robb, but they believe in you. That belief nearly got me killed, and now it's giving them a reason to fight." He turned away, eyes on the moon. "If I die again, I'll stay dead." Catelyn took his hand. "Just don't die at all." In King's Landing, word of Ned Stark's survival and Robb's crowning had spread like rot. The small folk whispered it in alleys. Merchants painted direwolves on barrels in secret. Even among the gold cloaks, the mood had shifted. Joffrey raged in the throne room. "If he's king in the north, then I'm the Seven Reborn. I want his head." Cersei slapped him hard enough to silence the court. "You'll speak when spoken. Unto this is war, not tantrums." She turned to Tywin's raven on the table. "Stark must fall before winter settles in. He will not survive the snow, but Varys, ever the shadow, had sent a raven of his own, not to allies, not to enemies, to Stannis Baratheon." And on Dragonstone, Stannis read the message silently by firelight. "Joffrey is illegitimate. Stark lives. The realm fractures." Sir Davos stood by. "What do we do, Your Grace?" Stannis's voice was flat. "We do what others fear. We strike truth into their hearts, and we burn the liars." He turned to Melisandre, the Red Woman, who smiled as the flames rose higher. "The night is long and full of terrors," she whispered. "But fire has found its champion." Meanwhile, in Riverrun's war tent, Robb, Ned, and their bannermen debated their next move. "The Lannisters will regroup at Harrenhal," said Roose Bolton. "If we strike now, we can catch them before they dig in." "No," Ned said, pacing. "That castle is a trap. Fire and shadow dwell there." "Then what?" Greatjon roared. "Sit here and wait for winter to freeze our balls off?" Ned slammed his hand on the table. "We draw them into the north, into the cold, into our ground. Let them chase ghosts. Let them starve and freeze and fear every shadow." The men went quiet. It was brutal. It was bold. It was stark. In the dead of night, Arya sat outside the tent, sharpening needle. She listened to the men talk of honor, strategy, and revenge. But her thoughts were simpler. Cersei, Joffrey, the Mountain. She would kill them all, one name at a time. At dawn, the northern army broke camp. They moved east toward Moat Cailin, into the frost-covered pines of their homeland. Behind them, smoke still rose from burned Lannister camps. Ahead, the true war waited. Not just for thrones, but for survival. And somewhere far beyond the wall, something ancient stirred. Not all enemies wore crowns, some wore snow. The frost thickened with every passing league. Trees loomed like ghosts. Snow crept across the earth in quiet sheets, turning the north into a graveyard, waiting to be filled. Ned Stark had seen many winters, but none like this. Not with war on their heels and vengeance in every heartbeat. Robb's army moved swift through the Wolfswood, silent as falling snow. No horns, no banners, just wolves and steel. At Moat Cailin, they made their stand. The ancient stronghold, battered and crumbling, was still a chokehold no southern army could breach easily. Narrow passes, swamps, disease, the North's natural defense, and this time it would not be passed without blood. Ned stood on its ramparts, wind lashing his cloak. He watched as the first Lannister scouts fell into their trap. Horses bogged, men pierced by hidden archers. Rose Bolton's men moved in shadows. The Umbers set fire to the supply lines. The Freys, ever snakes, sent mixed messages from the twins. But Ned wasn't afraid of the Lannister men. He was afraid of Tywin Lannister, because Tywin did not fight with pride. He fought with purpose, and he was coming. Back at Riverrun, Catelyn tended to the wounded and kept the younger lords from panicking. Every raven brought darker news. Sir Brynden Blackfish Tully had tried to harry the Lannister lines and disappeared. Edmure was preparing for siege, and the Riverlands, caught in the middle, were bleeding from both sides. But there was one raven that changed everything. It came from Yoren Bran was awake. Ned sat alone when the raven was brought to him. He read the words 3 times. Then his knees buckled. Bran remembered nothing of the fall, but he was speaking. Alive. Whole in body, if not in mind. For the first time since his escape, Ned allowed himself to believe in hope. But that hope was cut short by the next message. Winterfell had been attacked. A band of Ironborn, led by Theon Greyjoy, his ward, had seized it in the night. Theon had declared for himself a crown for salt and betrayal. And worse, 2 young boys' charred bodies had been found in the square. They claimed it was Bran and Rickon.